The opioid crisis, the mass shootings, the rising rates of suicide, especially among middle-class white males, the morbid obesity, the obsession with gambling, the investment of our emotional and intellectual life in tawdry spectacles, and the allure of magical thinking, from the absurd promises of the Christian right to the belief that reality is never an impediment to our desires, are the pathology of a diseased culture. They have risen from a decayed world where opportunities which confer status, self-esteem, and dignity has dried up for most Americans. They are expressions of morbidity. A loss of adequate income and social stagnation causes more than financial distress. It severs, as the sociologist Emile Durkheim pointed out in The Division of Labor and Society, that vital social bonds that give us meaning. A decline in status and power, an inability to advance, a lack of education and health care, and a loss of hope are crippling forms of humiliation. This humiliation fuels loneliness, frustration, anger, and feelings of worthlessness. In short, when you are marginalized and rejected by society, life often has little meaning. There arises a yearning among the disempowered to become as omnipotent as the gods. The impossibility of omnipotence leads, as the cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker wrote in The Denial of Death, to its dark alternative: destroying like the gods. In Hitler and the Germans, the political philosopher Eric Voegelin dismissed the myth that Hitler, an uneducated mediocrity whose only strength were oratory and an ability to exploit political opportunities, mesmerized and seduced the German people. The Germans, he wrote, voted for Hitler, and the, quote, grotesque marginal figures, end quote, surrounding him because he embodied the pathologies of a diseased society, one beset by economic collapse, hopelessness, and violence. Voegelin defines stupidity as a loss of reality. The loss of reality meant a stupid person could not, quote, rightly orient his action in the world in which he lives, end quote. The demagogue, who is always an idiot, is not a freak or a social mutation. The demagogue expresses the society's zeitgeist. A society convulsed by disorder and chaos, as Voegelin pointed out, elevates and even celebrates the morally degenerate. Those who are cunning, manipulative, deceitful, and violent. In an open society, these attributes are despised and criminalized. Those who exhibit them are condemned as stupid. Quote, a man or woman who behaves in this way, end quote, Voegelin notes, quote, will be socially boycotted, end quote. But the social, cultural, and moral norms in a diseased society are inverted. The attributes that sustain, in an open society, truth, honesty, trust, and self-sacrifice, are detrimental to existence in a diseased society. The idiots take over in the final days of crumbling civilizations. Idiot generals wage endless, unwinnable wars that bankrupt the nation. Idiot economists call for reducing taxes for corporation and the rich and cutting social service programs for the poor. They project economic growth on the basis of myth. Idiot industrialists poison the water, the soil, and the air, slash jobs and depress wages. Idiot bankers gamble on self-created financial bubbles. Idiot journalists and public intellectuals pretend despotism is democracy. Idiot intelligence operatives orchestrate the overthrow of foreign governments to create lawless enclaves that give rise to enraged fanatics. Idiot professors, experts, and specialists busy themselves with unintelligible jargon and arcane theory that buttresses the policies of the rulers. Idiot entertainers and producers create lurid spectacles of sex, gore, and fantasy. There is a familiar checklist for extinction. We are ticking off every item on it. The idiots know one word. Only one word. More. They are unencumbered by common sense. They hoard wealth and resources until workers cannot make a living and the infrastructure collapses. They live in privileged compounds. They see the state as a projection of their vanity. The Roman, Mayan, French, Habsburg, Ottoman, Romanov, Wilhelmine, Pahlavi, and Soviet dynasties crumbled because the whims and obsessions of ruling class were law. Trump is the face of our collective idiocy. He is what lies behind the mask of our professed civility and rationality. A sputtering, narcissist, imbecilic megalomaniac. He wields armies and fleets against the wretched of the earth, blithely ignores the catastrophic human misery caused by global warming, pillages on behalf of global oligarchs, and at night sits slack-jawed in front of a television set before opening his beautiful Twitter app. He is our version of the Roman Emperor Nero, who allocated vast state expenditures to attain magical powers. The Chinese Emperor Qixing Wang, who funded repeated expeditions to a mythical island of immortals in search of a potion for eternal life, and a delusional Russian royalty that sat in their palaces reading tarot cards and holding seances as war decimated their nation and revolution brewed in the streets. This moment in history marks the end of a long, sad tale of greed and murder by the white races. It is inevitable that for the final show, we vomited up a figure like Trump. Europeans and Americans have spent 5 centuries conquering, plundering, exploiting, and polluting the earth in the name of human progress. They use their technological superiority to create the most efficient killing machines on the planet, directed against anyone and anything, especially indigenous cultures which stood in their way. They stole and hoarded the planet's wealth and resources. They believed that this orgy of blood and gold would never end, and they still believe it. They do not understand that the dark ethic of ceaseless capitalist and imperialist expansion is dooming the exploiters as well as the exploited. But even as we stand on the cusp of extinction, we lack the intelligence and imagination to break free from our evolutionary past. As the warning signs become more palpable, rising temperatures, global financial meltdowns, mass human migration, endless wars, poisoned ecosystems, rampant corruption among the ruling class, we turn to those who chant, either through idiocy or cynicism, the mantra that what worked in the past will work in the future. Factual evidence, since it is an impediment to what we desire, is banished. Magical thinking is not limited to the beliefs and practices of pre-modern cultures. It defines the ideology of capitalism. Quotas and projected sales can always be met. Profits can always be raised. Growth is inevitable. The impossible is always possible. Human societies, if they bow before the dictates of the marketplace, will be ushered into capitalist paradise. It is only a question of having the right attitude and the right technique. When capitalism thrives, we are assured we thrive. The merging of the self with the capitalist collective has robbed us of our agency, creativity, capacity for self-reflection, and moral autonomy. We define our worth not by our independence or our character, but by the material standards set by capitalism, personal wealth, brands, status, and career advancements. We are molded into a compliant and repressed collective. This mass conformity is characteristic of totalitarian and authoritarian states. It is the Disneyfication of America. the land of eternally happy thoughts and positive attitudes. And when magical thinking does not work, we are told and often accept that we are the problem. We must adjust. We must have more faith. We must be positive. We must envision what we want. We must try harder. The system is never to blame. We failed it. It did not fail us. All of our systems of information, from self-help gurus and Hollywood to political monstrosities such as Trump, sell us this snake oil. Our retreat into self-delusion is a career opportunity for charlatans who tell us what we want to hear. The magical thinking they espouse is a form of infantilism. It discredits facts and realities that mock slogans such as "Make America Great Again." The profound alienation experienced by most Americans, the loss of self-esteem and hope, has engendered what Durkheim referred to as a collective state of anomie. Anomie is a psychological imbalance that leads to prolonged despair, lethargy, and yearnings for self-annihilation. It is caused by a collapse of societal norms, ideals, values, and standards. It is, in short, a loss of faith in the structures and beliefs that define a functioning democracy. The result is an obliteration of purpose and direction, what Friedrich Nietzsche saw as the core malady of modernity, its increased despiritualized nihilism. This nihilism, in its most radical form, is impervious to ethical critique and must be fought, as Nietzsche understood, with a matching religious fervor. Trump's ideological vacuum, the more he is isolated and attacked, is filled by the proto-fascist forces of the Christian right. The Christianized fascism, with its network of megachurches, schools, universities, and law schools, and its vast radio and television empire, is a potent ally for a beleaguered White House. The Christian right has been organizing and preparing to take power for decades. If the nation suffers another economic collapse, which is probably inevitable, another catastrophic domestic terrorist attack, or a new war, Trump's ability to force the Christian rights agenda on the public and shut down dissent will be dramatically enhanced. In the presidential election, Trump had 81% of white evangelicals behind him. If he leaves or is removed from office, Mike Pence, a creature of the Christian right, will be worse.